Rick Bozich, you are an Indiana Sports Writer Hall of Fame member and an IU graduate.
We know that you covered Bobby Knight and many of his teams and still cover the Hoosiers today. Rick, Coach Knight could be notoriously hard, not just on players, often also reporters as well. But he let a college journalist named Rick Bozich cover practice because you were at IU in the 70s, correct?
Yeah, I got to go to a few practices. I got to make 2 road trips. One was to Iowa City and Minnesota, and in that one, there recently had been an article about IU in Sports Illustrated that he hated because they called him a rampaging martinet who made his players eat bread and water. So he put me in a headlock when I got off the bus and said, "Who's your favorite sports writer?" And fortunately, I was a quick thinker, and I said, "Not Curry Kirkpatrick, who's the guy who wrote that article." And I said it was somebody else, and he told the student manager, "Give him the best room in the hotel and make sure he gets cookies and milk with the team later that night."
What are some of your other memories? What memories really stand out and come to mind of covering the coach?
I was there. I started in '71, the same year he started, and he changed the whole outlook of Indiana basketball, not just in terms of winning, but the way they played the game. Indiana was always known as the hurrying Hoosiers. That went away. They focused on defense. In his second year there, he went to the Final Four. Back then, only 1 team per conference made the tournament. It was a huge achievement. And then the last perfect season, and then 2 more national titles with entirely different teams. The sad part of his legacy, though, is just that he, as much and demanding as he was of his players to do the right thing, go to class, follow the rules, he couldn't control his own temper at times. And his departure from IU was sad.
I know, and we talk about how much of a legend he was. So can you talk about what his secret was to being a good coach, but then also, people loved him and they hated the fact that he was so controversial. How is that balance right there for the coach?
Yeah, in terms of why he was a great coach, he's a tremendous teacher. He's a big student of history. His favorite book was The Art of War. And he viewed basketball as war. You had to outthink your opponent. You had to out-prepare your opponent. He always said it's not the will to win, it's the will to prepare to win, which made you a champion. There's going to be 2 different camps. There are going to be people that are going to always look at the chair throw and the time he got into it with the policeman in Puerto Rico and he pushed an LSU fan in a garbage can. And then there are going to be other IU people that just talk about the winning it. And Indiana basketball hasn't been the same since he's been there. But really the balanced view is he was both guys. He was an incredibly complex person, and there'll never be anybody like him again.
You mentioned some of the controversies there, but for many, he was known as a hothead. It ultimately led to the end of his coaching career at IU.
Yeah, I mean, he got physical with people in a way that you can't do that. I mean, there was a video that came out of him choking Neil Reed, one of his former players, at practice, and he got put on a zero tolerance policy of doing it again. And then there was a student at IU who said, "Hey, Knight, what's up?" And he had a great respect for elders, and he expected to be treated like an elder, and he didn't like being called "Hey, Knight," and so he went after the kid. And I think he pushed him against a wall in Assembly Hall. And by that time, the administration at IU had changed because for a while he was the biggest guy in the state, bigger than the governor, bigger than U.S. senators. But by then, a different administration at IU, and they weren't going to put up with it anymore.
But really, even in his ousting, though, if you go back and you watch the video, there's this large group. I wouldn't call them a mob. There was a large group of students that marched from Assembly Hall to the governor's, or not the governor, the president's mansion.
Yes, they did.
And in outrage over the ousting of the coach.
It was a huge story. I remember I was on a show arguing with a IU player, Michael Lewis, with Brian Williams on MSNBC about should Coach Knight be disciplined, should he be fired, or should he not be? And I was like, what are you talking about? You can't go and grab somebody and choke them. But there were IU fans. He was so powerful that after he left and went to Texas Tech, there were stores in southern Indiana that sold Texas Tech gear, and there were fans who became Texas Tech fans because of Bob Knight.
Wow.
And then about 20 years after he was fired, he came back for a ceremony to be honored, but he had said he had no interest in ever going back to the school after he was fired. Do you think it was hard for him to go back for that ceremony?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think thankfully his son Patrick and his wife Karen, as well as Dr. Larry Rink and Bob Hamill in Bloomington, who are the ones that encouraged him to move back, convinced him it was the right thing to do, and some of his former players. And I'm glad that happened, because otherwise it'd be a larger part of the story. But there was his farewell moment at the Purdue game, and I was there that day, and as you can see, he really did enjoy himself.
And just one question. We're tight on time here, Rick. What is his legacy? Now that it's all said and done, how will Coach Bobby Knight be remembered?
He'll be remembered as one of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time, who also won an Olympic gold medal. And he'll also be remembered as a guy whose temper at times he couldn't control, and his legacy could have been even greater if he could have done that.
Michael Jordan on that 84
Yes, he was.
Olympic
He
gold medal
disciplined
winning
him.
team. All right, Greg Bozich, thank you so much for your incredible reporting. We'll look
Thank
for an in-depth article on WDRB.com.
Thanks.
And WDRB